Hello and welcome to NC Debrief. Now, the Debrief brings Africa's social stories into focus through analysis and perspectives every week. With our guests, we dissect the pressing issues and look out for angles and opinions that are not in the mainstream. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun, and today we're looking at matters arising from Kenya's census. Don't forget that you can also be part of the conversation using the hashtag NC Debrief and share your thoughts with us. Now with me, I have Becky Muikia. She is the Director for Programs and Content here at News Central. And also joining her is Elayne Okaya, who is the News Central East African Bureau Chief. Becky, Elayne, good to have you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so a quick bit of background on Kenya's censuses. Yes, there's a plural for census. Before we continue, now Kenya's population censuses have been conducted in 1948 and 1962, these both pre-independence, then 1969, 1979, 1989, and I think you see a pattern of every 10 years when Kenya produces its census. Now, controversy has swirled around the censuses for many years, and the one conducted in 1999 never had results officially released. A new census was undertaken in 2009, but it turned out to be controversial as the questions about ethnic affiliation seemed inappropriate after the ethnic violence of the previous year. Preliminary results of the census were published in 2010, showing that Kenya's population was about 38.9 million. Now, the 2019 census is just about wrapping up and has already thrown up many issues. We'll try to get to as many as possible in the time we have. So let's start with what sets this census apart from the previous ones conducted in Kenya, and most importantly, what also sets it apart from censuses conducted on the African continent. And the word here is inclusive. The 2019 census included a third gender for the first time ever. Kenya is the first African country to list intersex as a gender. Kenyans were allowed to identify as intersex as opposed to being forced to pick male or female. The census will also count persons living with albinism for the first time. So Becky, let me start with you. Let's talk about how Kenya got to the point of including intersex as a gender on this year's census.
I dare say the government was looking for a way out, for the easier way out, because we recently were in court over the whole intersex issue, and that court case didn't go well. I mean, I'm really sorry about this. I came back with a cold from Kenya. I went to be counted in the census. I was enumerated. I don't know about you, Elayne. I think it was the easier way out. I mean, we didn't have a conclusion on this whole intersex thing, as opposed to having people refusing to be identified as either male or female. Let's just have them check one box as I neither identify as male
or female.
I am in between. I mean, they didn't have a say, are you gay, are you lesbian, just an in between. I think it was the easier route out for the government, and that's just my personal opinion.
Now, Elayne, do you agree with her, given that there is a larger sort of conversation around intersex happening in Kenya? We know that the courts recently upheld Kenya's criminalization of homosexuality, and a lot of people tend to sort of inflate intersex and homosexuality when you're having these conversations. But let me also add that the Senator for People with for Persons with Disabilities is also pushing a law that would allow intersex Kenyans to change their sex on their national ID cards and include intersex on birth and death certificates. So in terms of the larger conversation beyond the census, what is the feedback from Kenyans in terms of having a conversation about intersex?
I think fundamentally it's important for people to feel acknowledged, for people to feel like they belong. And it's important for them to feel this way in the context of government and leadership as well. So I think perhaps this might be a small step the government is taking to sort of like acknowledge these people who don't identify as neither male nor female. You know, like in Africa, this has been a controversial discussion everywhere, a very controversial discussion, in some places more than others. And my feeling is generally Kenyans are not very receptive to this idea, but then I think we need to take steps to make people feel like they belong and they're part of, you know, they're part of their nation, they're part of their country, and they are there, they exist. You know, not acknowledging does not mean they don't exist.
Very true. Does before you add what you want to say, does either one of you think that this could sort of open the door to these wider conversations on the continent, as it may be? Becky, as you answer, and you wanted to add something.
I was going to disagree a little bit with Elayne. I think there's a certain generation that has acknowledged and accepted that there's people who don't identify as either male or female. They haven't been given that much prominence in terms of the media to speak about it, but digital media has changed how it is that we're communicating, and that's why the government is now acknowledging that, you know, we have to. So when you say that Kenyans by and large don't appreciate homosexuality, I think it's just our parents and their parents who are against this whole thing. But the millennials right now, oh man.
You think they're ahead of the game?
I really think
sorry,
okay, go ahead, Elayne. I have to all agree.
This is a question of really where you are from. My feeling is if you are in a certain economic class, it is more acceptable than others. If you come from the lower economic classes, I feel like there's more intolerance to this kind of thing. So really, I think there's that stratification based on where you live, where you're from, what you do.
And religion.
And religion as well.
Okay, so let's move on from this. Now, one of the other issues has been, of course, the feasibility and effectiveness of the census. Now, this year, all persons who will be within the borders of Kenya on census night, that is Friday, August the 24th, would have been counted. Now, this also included persons found in households, outside sleepers, sometimes also known as homeless individuals, persons on transit, individuals in hotels and lodges, and institutions such as hospitals, prisons, and army barracks, among others. Now, about 164,000 enumerators were expected to count about 48 million Kenyans on that one night, with a bit of spillover into the following days when it wraps up on the 31st of August. Now, in terms of feasibility and the scale of this exercise for Kenya, do we think the one night and the spillover is effective, as well as the 164,000 enumerators? Elayne, let me start with you.
I think it's important to acknowledge this is a gargantuan task.
Yes.
You know, as it is, there are about 50 million Kenyans spread across the whole country. Some places are extremely remote.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that it's a good initiative. I think the government has really tried. And it's important that this exercise happens for a number of reasons, for planning and other reasons. So it might not be that every single person may be counted, but I think an estimation would suffice in terms of what it is they are trying to achieve.
Do you agree with her, Becky?
I do. And I think census, by and large, are estimates. They are never accurate. And that's why they gave an extra couple of days for them to finish. The extra couple of days are only enumerating people for the 24th. I think it's
that
important
were missed.
for people, yes, for the 24th. So if you were pregnant and you gave birth on midnight of the 25th, your child will have to wait for another 10 years to be enumerated. And if you were not in the country, but you live in that household, you would not be counted on that day.
But I found it interesting that enumerators would ask family members about Kenyans who may have left for the diaspora, I think between that time and 15 years, but beyond that, they didn't want to look. And they won't count them, but they wanted to take that into cognizance as well. And I found it interesting since they were not doing diaspora counting. What are your thoughts about the lack of counting for the Kenyans in diaspora?
I think it's a capacity issue. I think we need to be realistic in terms of what it is we can do and what it is we can achieve. I know for a fact foreign Kenyan missions struggle to even know how many Kenyans
are in any specific country,
are in any specific locale, in any specific country. So I feel it is a matter of you know, just logistics and what it is we're able to achieve. Hopefully, maybe the next census will be able to you know, to count every single Kenyan in you know, all the major hubs across the world. But I think it's simply a matter of what it is we are capable of doing logistically. And
just to add to what Elayne is saying, I mean, the census, in essence, is supposed to help Kenya plan their resources.
Yes.
And so the resources are going to be planned for the people who are
in the country,
the borders of the nation. So I think it makes sense for them not to count the people in the diaspora, so they can be able to allocate their resources effectively for the people that are within the borders.
Now let's move on to something a little bit different as well with this particular census. Now, the size of Kenya's many tribes has been a particularly thorny issue when it comes to allocations, political influence as well. And we found that this year they also worked to sort of address that in the census. And one of the things they did was to ask Kenyans to identify their tribes or their ethnicities. So at this point in time, smaller tribes would not be subsumed into the larger ones, which has been some of the controversy and complaints of previous census. Now this has happened, and we have the issues of the government in previous census deciding not to release the figures for the tribes because they didn't want to stoke ethnic violence, as it may be. But around this issue, what do you think is the best way to have it handled? People need to know how many people belong to what tribe and what tribes are located in which regions or localities of the country. So in handling this, in previous years, the Kenyan government has kept the information to itself. Do you think that when preliminary results are released, this information should be made public?
Absolutely. I feel every Kenyan has a right to know this information. It's important, and it's the reality, you know. It's important for us to know for a number of reasons. We need to, I think, for us to have an honest conversation about equitable sharing of resources and leadership, we need to have a starting point, and that starting point is statistics and data. So I think it's important for this information to come out, more for the smaller tribes even, because one, we need to acknowledge these people. We need to know how many they are, and we need to give them that recognition that they are Kenyans and they are separate communities on their own.
Do you agree, Becky? I saw a bit.
I am all for acknowledging the communities, and even acknowledging communities we didn't know existed. I mean, as of now, we know we have 44 tribes. I dare say there's more that haven't been acknowledged, but I think our history ought to educate what it is that we do in our future, in our present and in our future. And 2007 was a very defining time for the country of Kenya. And we were a country that would never have expected what it is that happened. I mean, my grandparents, my parents are from Nakuru, the Rift Valley region, and it's predominantly populated by two of the rivaling tribes. Well, three, but more two, and I won't even mention them now because we still carry scars from what happened in 2007. And I remember it was very easy to target people in those areas because you knew who the majority tribe was in that tribe and who the minority tribe was. Even going down to areas like the slums like Kibra, we know who occupies those slums. We know who the landlords in those slums are, and it was the landlords that were being targeted by the occupants. So I'm like, if there's a way that we can avoid this happening again, if we can, in the sense I say, these are the tribes that we have in our country, this is how many we have in each tribe, but not go down to the specifics of
where they're located, where their stronghold is. Yeah,
I'm like, what happened in Eldoret didn't need to happen. What happened in Kibra didn't need to happen. And if withholding some of that information can stop us from getting to those extremities, then I'm all for withholding some of this information.
Okay. Yeah. So this census changed that. In fact, it created new tribal categories for indigenous people who in previous decades were either not counted or ended up being lumped together with larger tribes that they have long accused of stealing their land and also threatening their ways of life. So it is an ongoing conversation in this regard, and many are going to be seeing how the government handles it, given the underlying tension that never seems to be very far when you're having conversations on ethnicity and tribal issues in Kenya. Now we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Elayne has been mentioning two words consistently I picked up on, and that is acknowledgement and recognition. When we come back, we'll look at a statement from the Director General of the Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics, who says this is all about finding out who is a Kenyan. And I want to know if that resonates with many Kenyans out there. And also, we'll also be looking at issues surrounding privacy and anonymity of data in this census and how it plays into a larger context under the President Uhuru Kenyatta administration. Do stay with us. It's the NC Debrief. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for staying with us. I still have Becky and Elayne with me, and today on NC Debrief, we're looking at matters arising from Kenya's census. Now, the next part of our conversation will look at how this whole issue around recognition, acknowledgement, who is a Kenyan has resonated with the average Kenyan. The Director General of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, which organizes the census, said that the basic question that the census seeks to answer is who we are exactly as a country. We strongly believe that no one should be left out. We owe it to every Kenyan that they be recognized as who they are. Does this message, just this basic thrust or sort of like a theme behind the 2019 census for Kenya, do you think it resonates with the average Kenyan, Elayne?
In some ways it does. My feeling is that the resistance we have noted is basically just a social conditioning of Kenyans at the moment because they're generally unhappy with leadership. And this is across parties, you know, across counties, whether it's at national or at county level or lower. I think Kenyans are generally unhappy with
how things are playing out.
How things are playing out. So the resistance we've noticed to things like census, which fundamentally are a good thing by and large, is simply a reaction to basically the status quo as regards leadership at the moment. But I think it's an important initiative for us to undertake.
Becky?
It's an extremely important initiative, and an initiative with this kind of importance should have been given ample civic education. And that in itself, I think, is the gap that the government missed out on. They spent a lot of money educating us on campaigns and politics and how we were going to vote for the governors and senators. We never had none of that before we went into elections just this past 2 years. I think they should have spent that amount of money and time educating people on what the census would do. I didn't think that we would find out who we are as Kenyans from the census, but I took time to read through the questions they were going to ask, and I thought, actually, yeah, this might help us figure out, are we agriculturalists? Are we conserving our environment? Because they were asking all those sorts of things about trees, about whether you're into agriculture, the kind of energy you use in your house. Do you use electricity? Do you use gas? These things are going to help us define who we are as a country. But we don't know because no one told us. So half the time we spent with the enumerators when they came into our house was small talk. And when
how much time did you spend? Because they were averaging that every enumerator would spend about 30 minutes per household. So in the one that you participated in, how long were they with you?
I am not the SI unit for things enumeration because we were enumerated by a neighbor.
Oh, okay.
So we spent time offering them refreshments.
I don't think that's how it worked out for everybody else.
I don't think so, but I caught up with a couple of my friends, and I do know that people would ask questions as they were being asked by the enumerators. So when they ask you what it is that you use in the house, you want to know why. Why do you want to know that kind of information? So I dare say the 30 minutes was spent more on civic education. That could have been done a lot better. I mean, they could have used media. They could have used digital
radio
media.
jingles,
they could have
newspaper
used influencers. They could have
exactly. And I think that's one of the points in researching about this. Sensitization was a major issue for many people because aside from the intersex issue, which because of how it played out with the courts and the court judgment leading to its inclusion on the census questionnaire, for many people, other than that, and maybe hearing that on Friday 24th, that was going to be a shutdown because government did ask bars and things to close.
And we like our drink.
And a lot of people were not happy with that. And government was like, we're not going to come to a bar to count you. We need to count you in your homes.
And you have to remember that this came very close after we were forced to do the whole Huduma number thing.
We're about to get into that.
No one knows anything about.
So let's get into that because the Huduma number thing plays into a conversation that Kenyans are having right now on data, anonymity, and protection. So part of the census was also asking, well, just before the census kicked off, we had the government spokesman who said that Kenyans would be required to provide their national identity card number and their passport number. And Cyrus Oguna, the government spokesman, said that this was to establish the number of those who have actually acquired the documents. Now, just bear with me, this part of it is a bit lengthy. Now, many people are worried about what government wants to do with this info, given that government itself is the one that provides all of this stuff. They're the ones who provide the documentation, so they could easily go into their database and get this information. More importantly, finding out how many people have been issued passports does not require people to actually give their passport number. Now, Kenyans are saying there are some valid fears that need to be addressed from the government perspective. Now, you also have to put into consideration the Huduma.
Well done.
Huduma number that is also out there right now, and there's even been some threats from government officials, sort of like a very heavy-handed approach from the Kenyatta administration in terms of making people get that. There's a lack of a data protection law, and even the president's own words saying that 2,000 cameras have been installed in the capital Nairobi, as well as the coastal city of Mombasa. And there's also a draft national CCTV policy, which is seeking to make it mandatory for cameras to be installed in all public spaces, including hotels, hospitals, clubs, supermarkets, places of worship, apartment blocks, and so on and so forth. And they say this is to provide reasonable access, connection, linkage, and integration to security agencies. Kenyans are worried. What does government want to do with all of their data, national ID card, passport that they themselves already should have, but then also bringing into the aspect of cameras in public spaces as well, the Huduma number as well. So there's a very big conversation right now in Kenya around privacy issues, data protection, and a lack of a data protection law for Kenyans. What's happening around it? Because once you take the census out of it, that conversation continues. What's happening around this, Elayne?
I think if it's not already apparent to most, it's very obvious that data information as regards Kenyans and the Kenyan government is not centralized. So for instance, the immigration department does not have all the information it needs. The Office of Births and Registrations, which is under the Attorney General's office, is not centralized or connected with immigration. So they may have birth certificates, but immigration has passports, and it's not a centralized system. And we're seeing this with the Huduma number as well. And, you know, there was a big question of what is this for? Because, I mean, we have ID documents. We have an NHIF number. You have an NSSF number. You know, your social security and your national health insurance. You have a passport number. So what exactly is the Huduma number for? And
the court has even said Kenyans do not, in fact, have to get onto the scheme.
Exactly. And there was a lot of force. There was a lot of force surrounding the Huduma number issue. So the feeling, it's fundamentally a matter of trust.
Yeah.
And the question that a lot of Kenyans have is why does the government need this? What is it for? Because the feeling is that things like Huduma number and the census are fundamentally being used to further the political agenda. Let's remember we have 2022 elections coming up in a short while. So it's rather convenient. I mean, this is the time for the census, but it's convenient because then, you know, this data can be used, you know, in 2022 as and when people feel, you know, they need to use this information. So this is a big concern. But then the matter of trust is a big one. So the government needs to work very hard to win the trust of the people, you know, because as it is, Kenyans just generally don't trust the leadership.
I think it's even Africans and even globally, when you look at studies from places like the Pew Research Center, trust in government officials and governments around the world is low. We do not trust government institutions. And especially in a world where data and technology, we see what's happening in China, where they're using social credits to stop people from traveling or getting on planes. People are worried as to what African governments who are not so much known for respecting human rights and privacy could do with some of that technology and information. Do you agree with her in terms of where the Okay, you're not even letting me laugh. Okay, in terms of where the fears are, Becky?
I do.
Okay.
And we will always have conspiracy theories for as long as you do not educate the people and the masses
you leave the
what
gap.
The intent is. The Huduma number is an extremely important document for the Kenyans. I promise I do not work for the government of Kenya. And I think if they had just taken the time to educate the masses, less bullying. They really did bully people.
Yeah, very forceful.
They went as far. They did. They went as far as saying that our telephones would be shut down, would be cut off from certain resources if you didn't get the number, and people felt bullied. Yeah. So people were like, okay, they were just not gonna get the. In fact,
they took them to court.
Yeah, they did. But the Huduma number really is just consolidating all of these documents into one document. It's the equivalent of the social security number that the Americans have. So really, instead of carrying your NHIF, NSSF, ID, driver's license, instead of carrying all of these documents, this one document will consolidate all of this information. I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that as advanced as Kenya is, a lot of our government offices haven't electronized a lot of our data
We're still carrying file folders up and down Africa.
Yes, we are. And when you go to get your new passport, they will be pulling out files and folders and running from one office to another. And this really is what the government is trying to do. To put all this data electronically so it can be able to be accessed from whatever government office needs to access it, and to give us one card that consolidates all these offices. So if I need something for NSSF, Huduma number, NHIF, Huduma number. They really are doing a good thing.
Okay.
They just haven't told us what they want to do with it.
So then there's still question mark.
Yes, question.
All right. I wanted to quickly touch on security because we will be wrapping up. Now, one of the issues that did pop up was that of a 23-year-old enumerator who was gang raped after she was dropped off at home on the night of the enumeration. Now, the Director of Population and Social Statistics in the Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics said that depending on how census officials were received in the localities they were working, they could work up to until after or just around 10 p.m. But questions remain as to how security was catered for, even what instructions they were given in terms of their personal security. A young man was also arrested for attacking and injuring a census enumerator and destroying her phone and data capture kit as well. So in terms of security around the enumeration process, or rather the enumerators and the census process, do you think that government adequately did what it needed to do for the enumerators? Elayne?
My feeling is that there will always be isolated incidents, but then as unfortunate as those incidents are, I don't think then they should speak for the entire narrative or the entire security narrative of the operation. I think by and large the government tried. I don't know how I feel about the census being conducted at night. For me, that was a big concern as regards security, because then you just never know. I mean,
and that's a concern overall, regardless of whether there's a census or not.
Absolutely, the risks are significantly higher. But then when we audit the incidents that happened vis-a-vis the entire operation, I feel like, I mean, overall, I mean, I think they tried. I think they tried in terms of security. What happened to the young lady was very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. And I hope the perpetrators are brought to book.
Very much. Becky, quickly, as we wrap up.
I completely agree with her. But you did touch on the whole CCTV camera thing that has happened in the country. Yeah. I think those CCTV cameras are only scary until we need them to give us the evidence that we need. And they are all over the place. Elayne, I mean, we've had lots of incidences where we need the CCTV camera footage retrieved for us to be able to see what happened, and all of a sudden, they haven't been working for the past 6 months.
So there should be consequences, and there should be people who are held accountable for that lack of the capacity of the cameras.
Yes, so add all the cameras you want. In fact, put them everywhere you want, but ensure that they are working. Ensure that there are systems in place to ensure that what is needed once those cameras are put up is actually gotten when it's needed.
Fantastic. Ladies, thank you so much. Thank you, Elayne. Thank you, Becky, so much for joining me on NC Debrief today. And it's been really interesting to hear how the situation or conversation around census in Kenya is happening. Here in Nigeria, it's a forever controversial issue. And anytime government mules that they want to have one, there's always so many issues sort of mirroring what happens in Kenya that come up as well. But again, a very big thank you to both of my guests for sharing their thoughts today on the Kenya Census 2019. And that's it on this edition of NC Debrief. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you'll also join us next time at this same time, 1 p.m. Friday, West African time. Now, don't forget that you can follow us on all of our social media platforms using our handles at News Central TV, and you can also join the conversation using the hashtag NC Debrief. Our website is www.newscentral.ng, and until next time, whoever it may be, it could be me, it could be another one of the very lovely presenters here at News Central. We hope that we will see you again. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun, as my Yoruba people say, Odabo. Hi, my name is Tolu. You're watching News Central TV. Click here to subscribe to our YouTube channel.